So, step one, create a new project in more or less the same way you would any time. Give it a name. I would suggest that we call this R-type, for reasons that will become clear in a minute. Not going to create a class, not going to create a main project at this stage. If you don't get the options, again, don't worry about it. To be honest, if you have a main class, it will set that as, it'll use that anyway. So I suppose it might be useful to set it, I'm going to tick that box. It might be that you actually don't have any options because it only has one project, or you have no projects already. So there we go. I have another empty project. And what I'm going to do now is go to the resources that I showed earlier. This is a hyperlink to a tutorial on creating 2D Java games. So we're going to create an object. We're going to create a small piece of a small image. We're going to put it on the screen, and we're going to move it around based on what buttons you press. And then we can have more fun with it later. So the first thing we're going to need to do is create a package, and we need to call it R-type because that's what the tutorial calls it. So I'm going to go back to Netbeans. I'm going to right-click on that and go to New Java Package and call it R-type, taking care to make it lowercase because that is what it said there. It is case sensitive. Next thing we need to do is create a new Java file. Craft.java is going to define the class craft. So we're going to create a new class, and the class is going to be called craft. So craft with a capital C. I'm going to go back to Netbeans, right-click, new Java class, and call it craft with a capital C. Because that's not being used at the moment. Great. So we now have an empty class file. All that we've got right now is, all it says at the moment is what package it's a member of and the name of the class that we're going to define. It doesn't say anything more than that. You can see these are the comments that we were talking about earlier. So this bit is just going to get ignored. Change the template, choose tools, templates, and open this template in the editor. That's a comment, and they are useful for keeping track of exactly where you are in the code. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to this tutorial, and I'm going to highlight all the code within this one section. We'll dissect it and explain it a bit more in a minute. So everything within this sort of window, everything within this box, I'm going to highlight it all, and I'm going to right-click on it, and copy. And I'm going to go back to my class. I'm going to highlight all the code that's in there already because I want to get rid of it because we're going to end up duplicating some of it, as you'll see. And then I'm going to paste it in. So this was a link on Moodle. If you go back to, if we go to Moodle, which, if I click back, that should take me straight there. Of course, that'd be far too convenient. Basically, on the Moodle homepage, there's a link that says Fun with Java. Or Fun with Netbeans, rather. Click on Fun with Netbeans. You get a number of links. It's the top link. There it is. So if I go back one more. So this is the HND Computing homepage. And Fun with Netbeans is, actually, you will see something a bit different to that. You will see this. Fun with Netbeans is the middle link. If you click on that, you get a bunch of more links. Click on the top one, and then you see this. And if you scroll down, then you can see where I'm up to. So this is the code that I just copied and pasted. I copied that, pasted it in there, and as you can see, it still says the package is R-type, and the class is still called craft with a capital C. The next thing is going to be a bit more fun. I'd like you to open Paint in whichever way you want to do it. I mean, that works. Start, run, MS Paint, and that'll bring up Microsoft Paint. We'll resize the image and make it a little bit smaller. And then draw a spaceship. whichever direction you want. At the moment, it doesn't actually make much difference. Should probably do a blue Peter. Here's one I made earlier, so I'll in fact, I will. So now that I've drawn my rudimentary spaceship, I'm going to save it. So File, Save As, Desktop. From the drop-down menu, select .png. We need to save it as a .png file. PNG is just a file format. You can have JPEGs and bitmaps and PNG files, and we're going to use a PNG file for reasons that will become obvious in a moment. I'm going to call it craft with a lowercase c and save it to the desktop. The reason I did that is because in the code it refers to craft.png. So this is the name of the file. We can actually change that and then change the name of the file, but I think it makes more sense to just stick with what we've got at the moment. We'll fiddle with it later. Once you've done it, it's really good fun to then go and redraw another spaceship and then change the code to create more, and we'll do more on this later. But for now, I'm now going to go back to the desktop. I'm going to find my PNG file, and I'm going to drag it and drop it into my package. And there it is, craft.java, craft.png. So Java can now find that craft.png file. It now knows where it is because I dragged and dropped it into the package. Hooray! Yeah, yeah, it might do that. Actually, let me. So yeah, apparently it might bring up a picture of it. If it does, then you can use the tabs across the top. It's just basically showing you. In fact, I could even do it on mine. If I double click on that, it'll open it in a small tab here. But I can flick back and forth between my different files that I have open. There it is. Actually, the next thing I'm going to do, just for the sake of perfection, if you go to Properties and then Summary, or yeah, there it is, then it'll tell you how big it is. So it's 85 by 75. So I'm going to go back to my code and I'm going to change this, because this is basically saying the size of my image. I'm going to say that's 85 by 75. It makes sense to make the image a reasonable size. If it's more than 100 pixels, that's probably too big. What you can do in Paint, if you have an image that's too big, you can scale it. So if you go to Sketch Skew, if it's like, I don't know, 700 by whatever, then just scale it down to 10% of its original size. And then it will scale it down for you. Once again, if you click on Image, Sketch/Skew. Okay. And then you just reduce them both by a certain percentage. Reduce them both to 10%, and then that'll be great. So there we go. This is our definition for craft. It has many, many attributes. So this is our craft class. It has many attributes. It has a width. It has a height. It has a motion. It has like a direction that it's currently moving in. And it has an image associated with it. And that image has a certain size. And it has the ability to move. So what's happening here, these are variables that we're creating. This is an integer variable, the direction that it's moving in and the speed that it's moving in. This is the direction it's moving in the vertical. This is, well, we'll find out more about what these are in a minute. And we have an image data type we called image. And yeah, and what's happening, what you can see the code is doing here, x is, what that's saying is x plus dx. I could rewrite this as x equals x plus dx. So that's all that's happening there. Does that make sense? So the value of x is now, so if x is 1 and dx is 1, or if x is 1 and dx is 2, then to start with, then x is now equal to 1 plus 2. So by the time you finish that, it then becomes 3. Does that make sense? Good. So, no, I'm just demonstrating. I'm just trying to explain some of what, I'm just going through the code we just copied and pasted and explaining some of it. Return functions, I think, will explain a bit more. It's a special type of procedure which returns a value. We'll talk more about those later. And what we have here is some more if statements. So if the key pressed is the left key, then the direction it's moving in is the x direction -1. Similarly, if the right key is pressed, then the direction it's moving in is x +1. And if it's up, then the y direction is -1. And if it's down, then the y direction is +1. In maths, when you're drawing grids, when you're drawing graphs, you start in the bottom left. With computer graphics, you start in the top left. That's why it seems a bit backwards. So up is -1, basically moves it up, and +1 moves it down, because you start in the top left corner. Yeah, so that's what happens when you release the key as well. When you release the key, then you stop it moving, basically. Otherwise, you press up and it will carry on doing it, which you might want it to do, or you might not. I mean, in Pac-Man, you want it to carry on moving until it misses something. In this scenario, we don't want it to do that. So that's the code that we just copied and pasted. Let's go back to our tutorial. So, and it basically explains what I just said. So this is moving things around. That's stopping it from moving when you release the button. Yeah, so we want that to be 0. Postgraph will stop moving, which is what I just said. So the next thing we need to do is create another class called board. We've now got a craft class, so we can create craft objects. The next thing we need to do is put a space, make some space for the craft to fly about in. Create a universe for the craft to play in. So board.java is what this is all about. So we need to create another class called board.java. So what do? Splendid. And what do we call it? Board with a capital B. Great. And once again, we have an empty class. Notice we now have a number of different objects that all sort of open. So if I double click on craft.java, it takes me back to this file. If I double click on board.java, it takes me back to this one. Our code is now in 2 separate files, but it's all still part of the same program. They will talk to each other through the main method that hangs them all together. So the main method will call board, and it will call craft. It will call the 2 classes that we just created. Yep. Yes, that's normal. That means it's an error. And so yeah, make sure that you copy and paste it over the code that's in there, as I will demonstrate once again with board. So we go back to our tutorial. We find the code, package rtype, same package. These are the libraries that we're using. We're going to reuse other people's code rather than having to write our own stuff for drawing graphics and action events are basically button presses on the keyboard. We don't want to have to write our own keyboard driver, so we're going to use these other people's code. Other people have already written code to explain to the computer how keyboards work. We're going to reuse that. That's what these lines are all about here. Similarly with color and drawing 2D graphics, we don't want to spend loads of time reinventing the wheel. We'll just reuse other people's code. So package rtype, we'll copy all that, and we'll scroll all the way down to the bottom of the box. Copy this. Go back to Netbeans. Once again, highlight all that. Make sure that you copy it over the top. And there it is. So we've now got some more information in there. This line here is quite interesting. Craft is the class. This small craft here, though, is an object of class craft big C. So up here, we defined in this file here, we defined what a craft was. We defined the class craft. What's happening here in the board is the board is creating a new object craft of type craft. It won't override it. In the same way, it's a bit like defining what a pen is. So now we know what a pen is. I'm going to create a new object of type pen. This is an object of type pen, and this is an object of type that. Say again? I'm creating a craft. In this file, I'm defining what a craft is, and in this file here, I'm creating a craft based on what I said in this other file. Does that make sense? Great. Good. Yeah, you're creating something that obeys, this thing will obey those rules. This thing will come, all the methods and procedures. So in here, we defined these variables, and we defined these methods. We defined these procedures. Yeah. So what we're going to do is create something that follows those rules and procedures. The spaceship, exactly. It also means that if we want to create other spaceships in the future, we can create other spaceships in the future that still follow the same rules. If I wanted to create a second spaceship, all I have to do is now copy and paste that and give it a slightly different name. Call that craft 2. And now I also need to find it up there. But that should then stop complaining. Yeah, there we go. So now if I run this, in theory, I'm going to have 2 crafts on the screen. Having defined what a craft is, it's then very easy to create lots of new ones because they all have these same rules. Cool. But we'll just stick with one for now. We can fiddle with it and debug it later, and you're going to have a lot of fun with this yourselves, I'm sure, over the next week. So we've now got a board. We'll go down a bit more. Have a timer. There's some things which allow it to paint stuff on the screen, actually draw stuff to the screen. By all means, look into this code in a bit more detail if you want to, but recognize that you are never going to understand every Java library and every single Java instruction that you could possibly give the computer, because there are many of them. Public means public means it can be accessed from other packages. Void means it doesn't return a value. Don't worry about that. That will make more sense later on, what I've just said. So yeah, when you move it, repaint it. Otherwise, you get a sort of ghosting effect. This line here basically deletes what was there before and then creates a new one. Yes? Yes, it has a hex code associated. Yes, you can. You can say color and then give it a number instead. Yes, but for now, recognize that it's going to create a universe which is blank. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to speed, yeah, okay, so if we go back to the tutorial, and that basically says what I just said. By all means, read it in more detail at a later date. So now we need to create another class called rtype with a capital R and a capital T. So we'll go back here, new Java class, rtype with a capital R and a capital T, and click finish. So now we've got we're creating a third Java class here, and this is actually going to be surprisingly small. This is our main method. This is our main thing that happens. It's actually only one line. Here we're creating a class rtype. So we're defining what an rtype is. And then all that happens in main is it says create an rtype. An rtype is an instance of the game. Yes, it's the execution of the application. What we could do, if we wanted to create another rtype, if we wanted to create another object of the same class, what we can do is you might like to have 2 rtype windows open at once. So you could have like different windows all running the same thing, but controlled by the same program, if you wanted to, which might be useful for maybe a multiplayer feature if you want to faff with that later. Great. So we've now copied and pasted all the code, and the last thing that we should do is run it. No main class found. Okay, that's slightly irritating. The main class is there. I know that it's there. So I know what file it's in. So I'm going to right click on there and run the file. And there it is. I've created a spaceship and I've created a space for it to fly around in. And you can speed it up, and what I would suggest you do now is if you go and fiddle with some of those variables, try and change the color, try and create multiple spaceships, follow the rest of the tutorial. Next week, come back having written an amazing game that's going to keep everyone occupied for months. Yeah, yeah. Your homework is basically create a new Angry Birds, which is a lot better.